If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire.
And JR.
And today we are talking various government conspiracies of all kinds with special focus on the one and only Bob Lazar and what he did or didn't see, whether or not it was real, whether it was actual alien technology or not, or whether it was something else entirely in typical MINDSHOCK fashion with logic and reason at the forefront. As always, if you enjoy the MINDSHOCK podcast, want to help support it, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, podcast requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, serious thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. All right, let's get started.
But, what the fuck is up with politics? Like, what is up with the scumbaggery of the world? What chemicals did they dump into the water supply during the COVID? I really want to know.
Well, I believe fluoride is the norm. Are you saying you have some insider information, JR, and additional chemicals they've been dumping into the water supply?
Cut this shit, Bruce. You know that, the world has become, really weird all of a sudden. This didn't happen during the Spanish flu. There was, some wars, and then there were baby boomers afterwards. What the fuck is going on with, the world? What's with these, people, suddenly, the thems, living in these, rooming houses? What's going on? I don't understand.
I'm a little rusty on my Bible passages, but wasn't there some Bible passage that it says demons will reveal themselves as they, them? I'm a little rusty. Is that correct?
Would you be surprised?
I'm a little rusty. Was there a Bible passage that said something about demons revealing themselves as they, them?
I have no fucking clue. I probably went to confession, later than you. Who knows? Maybe some people from, the Bible Belt will be able to chime in. All I know is that, it's just really fucked up all of a sudden. It's not even that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's the whole shebang. It's not being taught cursive in school. It's all this fucking tickle me Elmo bullshit. And, somehow it relates to we're supposed to sit around and, just be cool with the fact that the world doesn't want us anymore. What is this?
Well, if you want to pinpoint something, I was actually going to ask you, but, do you believe that there was some kind of timeline shift in either the year 2000? Some people believe it was Y2K and it actually did happen. And it caused some kind of timeline shifting into full-on clown world. Although I want to ask you this as well. Did your grandparents, did they have the same complaints? Because I vaguely remember older generations saying the exact same thing you're saying now, that the world went completely off the rails, and back in their day, we're talking early 1900s now, there wouldn't be all of this insane nonsense that was going on in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So,
Bruce, this has nothing to do with any kind of Y2K. This is some sort of chemicals working its way into the fucking human genome. My parents' generation saved the whales. This generation fucking builds equipment offshore so they beach themselves. Explain that.
What kind of, are you talking some kind of 5G, 4G signals that are messing up the birds and all of the mammals and fish in the water?
I don't know. Maybe it's because, the honeybee is becoming extinct. Who the fuck knows? I'm just telling you that the world
itself... Don't you have some kind of clearances? I was hoping you would know. The MINDSHOCK listeners depend on JR. And by the way, we're starting a segment called JR's Corner at the end of the podcast where there's a lot of questions coming in for you, JR. So if you would be so kind as to answer listener questions at the end of the podcast. But regarding your clearances, I know you never specified which branch you work for or whether or not you're just a janitor for the Park Service. But if you do have some kind of clearances, I was hoping you would know the answer to these questions. Chemtrails, radiation, all of this stuff. Come on, the
Bruce.
MINDSHOCK listeners are depending on you, JR.
Bruce, the government is gone. It's gone.
Are you saying you've lost complete faith in the establishment?
Well, I mean, to be fair, Bruce, I never really, was certain if I had faith in the establishment. I kind of just went with the flow at a certain point.
Hold on a second. All right, hold on a second. Can you at least tell us the story of how you first got involved with the military and the government? Because you've been very cagey regarding exact details.
Okay, I'll tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was a kid in high school, and they floated a benefits package with a sign-on bonus.
It's really that simple?
Well, I actually come from a military tradition, but I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, it was that and a lot of internal family pressure.
Wow, so there you have it. So JR was not some kind of patriot that was looking to serve his country. He was just there for the dinero.
Whoa. I never said I wasn't patriotic. Okay, I never said that I didn't, believe any of this. I really thought we were gonna go out and do some good. I didn't really realize that at the end of the road, it was really just an 8:30 to 4:30 job, where after you serve the military, then you go off into a secondary federal position. They didn't really express that at the time. It was all about fighting terrorists and international warfare and being part of the theater, the war theater. It was there was a lot more to it than that.
That's a very interesting phrase, JR. By war theater, do you mean all the world's a stage and all these wars are some kind of manufactured operations?
Well, no, that's what they call it, Bruce, the Eastern Theater,
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, is there some hidden symbology there, hiding the truth in plain sight, if you will?
It wouldn't be surprising. I mean, I worked in the government long enough to know that, some guy sitting at some cubicle somewhere was probably just let's name it this. So, who knows? I don't know.
Come on, JR. You definitely know more than what you're saying. Some people...
Yeah, I do, but, I've got to, break it off at a certain point.
All right. Do you want to talk about Bob Lazar? Bob Lazar has been trending for a bit.
The military recruits many talented civilians when special expertise is required. The propulsion systems expert, Bob Lazar, claims he was one of them. In this exclusive interview, he gives his detailed account of his employment with the Department of Naval Intelligence at the top-secret facility known as S4, where, according to Bob, he was hired to work on recovered alien spacecraft. S4 is located 125 miles north of Las Vegas and 15 miles south of Groom Lake. This now not-so-secret military base at Groom Lake, Nevada, is known as Area 51, or Dreamland, as insiders like to call it. Born in 1959 in Coral Gables, Florida, Bob has lived much of his life in Las Vegas, Nevada. With degrees in physics and electronics from MIT and Caltech, he has dabbled in everything from chemistry to fireworks in an effort to understand the finer points of propulsion. He has even assembled a jet car with a 22,000 horsepower engine salvaged from the Navy F-3D Skydive that is capable of land speeds of over 350 miles per hour. Fate took a serious turn for Bob in 1982. Arriving early for a lecture at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico given by Dr. Edward Teller, one of the inventors of the atomic bomb, Bob was able to meet and talk to the famous physicist. Coincidentally, Dr. Teller was reading the local paper, The Monitor, with a featured front-page article on Bob, and the two struck up a conversation. Later, Bob sent Dr. Teller his resume for consideration, and soon after, Bob was hired by the Los Alamos National Laboratory. This Los Alamos-based directory lists Bob as an employee. By 1989, Bob was brought into the top-secret program at S4, known as Project Galileo. In the following interview, Bob reveals many details of this amazing experience.
We never actually got into the nitty-gritty with Lazar. He's been requested multiple times. I want your actual cut and dry analysis. Now, you never actually stated whether you knew John Lear or not. And by the way, we need to do a follow-up podcast on John Lear. I didn't even realize he had passed.
Bruce, let me just correct you. I've never actually done, like, you know, anything on your show other than float, like, my own personal opinions and theories. I haven't given you any kind of classified debunked...
Give us some... Okay, give us... What is your actual... First of all, do you know Bob Lazar personally?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Did you witness any disc technology at Area 51?
No, there was absolutely no ET craft, ET technology, anything like that at Area 51. This is why S4 was made specifically to separate it there. People at Area 51 do not have the clearance.
How long were you employed at S4, and when were you hired?
When was I hired at S4? I guess early '89, and I was probably there only about 6 months or so, on a very infrequent basis.
How were you transported to and from work?
At the time that I was working there at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, there was a Special Projects EG&G building. When I was told to go to work, I drove there, parked my car there, and got in a plane at the airport, flew to Groom Lake, where I deplaned and waited for a bus, and the bus drove me down to S4. The S4 facility is an area just off the Papoose Lake bed, dry lake bed, and it consists of 9 hangars. The hangars have sloped doors on them with a sand texture coating. Around the opposite end of the hangars, there's the standard entrance where you're dropped off at, go through a security check, and inside there's a small complex. There is some office space, there's several laboratories, the hangars themselves, of course, and a few other places. I didn't have free reign to go wherever I wanted to. Everywhere I went to, I was essentially escorted, so that was really all about that I saw.
Inside the facility, what was the basic layout? Were there underground levels?
I don't think there were any underground levels to it, though there could have been. I don't think it was an extensive underground facility. It just looked like an installation that was butt up against a mountain. And, I didn't see any evidence of any stairs going down, elevators, or, but like I said, I don't know. There could have been, and I just might not have been permitted in those areas. It's difficult to really surmise how long it had been operational. Everything did look fairly new. By that I mean I don't think this installation was there in the early 70s. Nothing was worn. Things looked fairly freshly painted. So, as a ballpark guess, I would say it would really surprise me if the installation was older than 5, 7, 10 years, something like that.
A scientist killed in the project. What exactly happened there?
Allegedly, obviously, I didn't see this, and I don't know it to be fact, but this is what I was told, that I was hired to replace one of a couple people that were killed while working on one of the reactors from one of the crafts. Apparently, they, for whatever reason, cut open an operating reactor, and the device exploded, killing both of them. The scientists that were killed there, allegedly the detonation from the explosion was fairly large. It would have rivaled a small tactical nuke. So it was done at the Nevada test site, and it was to be passed off as an unannounced nuclear test.
Did you have any direct contact or communication with aliens?
No, not at all.
Tell us about the briefing files. Under what conditions did you gain access to them?
I was put into the briefing room with 121 or 22 briefings, and really was just told to sit and read through them. I think they were there just to mainly educate me on what was going on. They weren't a complete in-depth explanation on everything else, but just essentially a brief synopsis on some of the other projects that were going on there. Supposedly, the information, now this isn't something that I determined, it's something I was told, that the crafts originated from a planet that orbited the Zeta Reticuli star system. Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2 are two stars of a binary star system. The craft allegedly came from there.
Well, I already know you've been out to Nevada, and you don't like talking about Nevada. I know you've been there. Now, whether you just worked as a janitor at some national park or you actually were involved in some kind of operations, that's up to the MINDSHOCK listeners to discern. But I know you've been out there. So did you cross? So you won't even say whether or not you crossed paths with Lazar. How about this? Do you know people who know Bob Lazar?
Oh, I'll pull a full CIA, Bruce. There's no such place called Nevada.
What is this Nevada you speak of?
Yeah, and there's no Colorado neither.
Whoa, what's up with Colorado?
Oh, shit. Yeah, well, don't worry about Colorado. Yeah, there's a Colorado. Just drive straight through it. I kind of meant to say Wyoming, but, like, you know, that's a little,
Do you know people who know Bob Lazar? Can you at least say that?
What was your job description at S4?
My official job description was a senior staff physicist. I don't know if I actually had that position when I was there, because I was there so infrequently. I wasn't supervising anyone, so that was the official position I was hired under. But whether or not I actually acted in that capacity, I don't know.
What was the size of the staff working on Project Galileo?
Well, there were 22 people employed there totally.
And that was specifically for the Galileo project?
No, for the entire project. There were 22 people with Majestic clearance. I had Majestic clearance. Majestic clearance was designated as clearance 38 levels above Q clearance, and Q clearance is the civilian top secret clearance.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, Bob Lazar is actually pretty well known. Like, you know, I mean, he's not really, like, a secret. In fact, he's pretty, plain from the dirt, if you ask me. I'm
not asking you if you've heard of Bob Lazar. I'm asking you, do you know people?
No, I mean, like, you know, he was actively involved, like, you know, in, like, you know, like, actually presenting and stuff. I mean, like, you know, the government, believe it or not, like, they have a lot of, like, conspiracy theorists and stuff that, like, actually come around and give their skew. It's
right,
not like...
So let's keep this as cut and dry as possible. What do you think of Bob Lazar? Do you find it coincidental that John Lear was very chummy with Lazar?
Does that surprise you, Bruce?
No, I'm asking the questions, JR. You're answering the questions. Let's go.
I don't have to answer the questions.
I didn't say you had to, but you're on a podcast, so answer the damn question.
All right, Bruce, like, no, I don't find that it's strange that, like, he was, like, you know, chummy with John Lear. But then again, I think it was more like John Lear was chummy with him.
Okay. All right, well, what do you think of Bob Lazar? So, what's your analysis?
I think he's a little bit more credible than John Lear.
Wow, that's a bold claim. I would say the opposite, but then again, you still didn't answer the question. Do you know people who know Bob Lazar?
Okay, so outside of a certain ring of people, like, there's a certain degree of separation that I'm not going to get into, but, like, yeah, like, it's single-digit separation that, like, you know, I would say,
Okay,
like...
right. So, and what do those people that you've talked to that know him personally, what do they think of Lazar?
Do you really want to know this?
Yes, I do. And I think the
His
MINDSHOCK...
buddy is a complete crackpot, but, like, I mean, you know, like, if you ever met them in person and saw what they were talking about around the water cooler, like, you would think they were crackpots. So, I mean, they kind of cancel each other out there.
Wow. Okay, so we're finally getting some golden nuggets from JR. Okay, this is great. Okay. All right. So, other government agents who know Lazar think he's a crackpot, but you're saying they're also crackpots. So that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that answer, and I expect all sorts of weird answers. So this is a multi-pronged issue. So first of all, let's run through the gauntlet just briefly real quick. So Bob Lazar passed all these lie detector tests. Some people find that strange.
Who says he will no longer hide the truth. Bob Lazar claims our government captured alien spaceships, UFOs, and keeps them in a secret warehouse. And that's not all. Bob says Uncle Sam hired him to figure out how they fly. If you're skeptical, you have plenty of company. Lazar has been questioned and criticized. He even had to take a lie detector test, and that's when some people started believing him. Dan Housley has the inside report. The man who wants to blow the lid off what could be the greatest story never told, and the people who seem to be trying to stop him.
Strange lights over Las Vegas, within view of tourists and gamblers along the city's Casino Row. What are the odds these are alien spacecraft out for an evening spin? Or would you bet they're simply standard aircraft, or worse yet, some kind of hoax? Before you decide, take a look at another shot on this home video, where what does appear to be an aircraft strays into view along with the lights. Strange things like this have been appearing over the Nevada desert for years. The answer to the mystery may lie in the sprawling Nevada nuclear test site just north of the city, in a place called Area 51. Area 51 is known by other names: Groom Lake, Dreamland, the Skunk Works. It's an isolated military facility where the U.S. develops its most top-secret projects. The U-2 spy plane was developed here. So was its replacement, the high-flying Blackbird, along with the current stealth aircraft and Star Wars. But there are some who believe these formerly secret projects are nothing compared to what's currently under wraps. Not too many people live out here in the remote sections of the Nevada desert, far from the lights of Las Vegas. But here, on the edge of the secret U.S. government test facilities, people have been seeing strange things for years. Some of them talk about it, a lot of them don't. But no one who has actually worked on the test site has ever talked about what goes on there. No one, that is, until now.
They are actively and have in their possession alien spacecraft, and they are actively undergoing analysis.
And flying them.
And flying them.
Bob Lazar is an engineer and physicist who says he worked on flying saucers for the U.S. government at Area 51. He drew these sketches of one of 9 different saucers he says the government has in a secret warehouse. Lazar gave the saucers each names according to their various shapes: Top Hat, the Sport Model, the Jello Mold.
Called in to help figure out how they work, Lazar says the saucers are powered by an antimatter generator, fueled with an element which he says could only have come from another planet.
They set up and produce their own gravitational field. Just as the Earth holds all matter down, they produce that same field, but out of phase, and it repels itself. The effects that can cause, the way in which everything operates is by all intents and purposes, magic. I mean, it is so far beyond our level of technology.
Now, before you toss Lazar on the pile with all the other UFO wackos, understand that he willingly agreed to take a lie detector test, requested and independently arranged by a Las Vegas reporter. Terry Tabernetti is the ex-cop who administered the test.
If he's lying, he ought to be in Hollywood, because he gave absolutely no physiological indications of attempting deception.
Lazar says he was referred to his government job by Dr. Edward Teller, the renowned scientist who helped develop the atomic bomb. But in a rare interview with Inside Report, Teller insisted he doesn't know Lazar, or at least doesn't remember him.
I think it appears that someone's trying to wipe him out.
George Knapp is the Las Vegas TV reporter who first aired Bob Lazar's amazing claims. He says he ran into unusual problems just trying to look into Lazar's background. Though Lazar claimed to have once worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, government officials denied they knew anything about him. But when Knapp came up with a phone directory listing Lazar's name, Los Alamos grudgingly admitted he had spent some time there. Officials at the hospital where Lazar was born even denied the simple fact he was born there, until Knapp tracked down the doctor who delivered Lazar.
I find Bob to be credible, and the main reason is because the story hasn't changed. It's stayed from the beginning. It's been the same. It hasn't expanded like some of these UFO tales you hear. It's been the same. And we've been through a lot of different interview sessions, many on camera, many more off camera. And it stayed exactly the same, consistent.
So and I'm going to give my take. I believe I've actually stated this on a previous episode where we briefly mentioned Lazar. We're going to get a little deeper into Lazar, but this is a multi-pronged issue. So he passed all the...
Wait. Before you get into this, let me just pose one particular thing here. Because, you're asking me about the degrees of separation. How do you know that Bob Lazar isn't just a shell for, like, an actual separate identity altogether?
Well, that's actually one of the things I was just going to get into.
Yeah. I mean,
Let's get into this. So this is a multi-pronged theory here, because there's a lot of issues here. So when Lazar first went public, he actually didn't even show his face in that first interview. So he was either scared or that was a manufactured identity, and this is all by design, all for show.
This week in our series of reports on UFOs, we learned a number of things. That not everybody who sees a UFO is crazy, that our government has lied about UFO information, that it's withheld UFO files, and even spied on UFO witnesses. We've also heard from scientists who say life elsewhere in the universe is virtually a certainty. And we heard that a majority of Americans believe that UFOs are real and come from space. Tonight, in part 5 of his report, George Knapp introduces us to a local man with an amazing and disturbing story. George.
Gary and Mary Ruth, we've been working on this story for a long time, and we'll tell you right up front that it's going to be hard to swallow at first. This week, we've heard the contention of UFO researchers that there's a secret government within our government. While that may be hard to believe coming from the UFO perspective, we've certainly learned in Watergate and the Iran-Contra scandal that factions within our government can and do pursue their own hidden agendas outside of the law, outside the control of Congress, or the knowledge of the American people. This is exactly the type of operation we'll hear about tonight. It's a chilling scenario with worldwide implications that may have its roots right here.
Area 51, that mysterious corner of the Nevada test site, is no longer much of a secret. The fact that secretive things go on here is a given, even to the Soviets, who make daily spy flights over the facility to take a peek at what's going on. These photos, never before shown in public, are about as close as anyone will ever come to seeing what the place looks like again. The dry bed of Groom Lake, corrugated metal buildings, a 3-mile-long runway, and some highly sophisticated radar and detection equipment. It's been known by many names over the years: Dreamland, the Ranch, the Skunk Works. If ever there was a place to test a secret new technology, this is it. And that's exactly what's been done here for decades. Area 51 is where Francis Gary Powers and the other U-2 pilots were trained in the 50s, and where the U-2 itself was developed. The SR-71 spy planes that spotted Soviet missiles in Cuba in the early 60s were also developed at 51. 51 is where stealth technology was nurtured, where Star Wars devices are still tested, and where all manner of CIA monkey business has been plotted and refined. It's the perfect place for secret things, but of course, that's no secret. 51 is ringed by the forbidden vastness of the Nevada test site, by the looming Groom Mountains, and by sparsely populated desert expanses. The few people who do live out here have no love lost for the military, but they're conservative, patriotic, and they mind their own business.
You ever see stuff you can't explain?
Sure. Lots of stuff.
Care to elaborate?
No.
Happy anniversary to you.
On any given night at the Rachel Bar and Grill, you might find 3 or 4 people who work at Area 51, there amid the flowing Budweisers and cowboy hats. You might find them, but they aren't going to talk to you, not about the things they've seen over the mountains. A steady trickle of curiosity seekers flows through here, strangers drawn by strange stories of lights in the night sky. Their questions also go unanswered. No one who's worked at Dreamland has ever publicly acknowledged what so many people have suspected for years, that alien technology is being tested in the Nevada desert. The speculation first surfaced in documents obtained by UFO researchers, documents about something called Project Aquarius. The documents, allegedly prepared for an organization called MJ-12, state that a program to fly recovered alien spacecraft was established in 1972 and is continuing in Nevada. The National Security Agency has confirmed it does have a Project Aquarius, but denies it has anything to do with flying saucers. NSA will not say what Project Aquarius is. Speculation was heightened in 1984 when the Air Force seized nearly 90,000 acres around Groom Lake. The action was, by most accounts, illegal. During congressional hearings about the land grab, Congressman John Seiberling grilled the military about the legal authority used in the action and was told the authority was at a much, much higher level than the Air Force. Seiberling asked what authority is higher than the laws of the United States. The Air Force official said he could respond, but only in a closed briefing. In 1987, when the Air Force sought to renew its stranglehold on the Groom Range, news articles once again mentioned the talk about alien spacecraft, and subsequent articles in national magazines quoted unnamed sources about things of alien origin flying in Nevada, things that would make filmmaker George Lucas drool. Despite the speculation, no one who knew Area 51 from the inside ever talked publicly about the saucer stories.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
The live interview with the shadowy Dennis drew international attention. Portions were broadcast by radio in 6 European countries and in a nationally televised TV special in Japan.
Actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." He hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it. I know what the current state of the art is in physics, and it can't be done.
Checking out Lazar's credentials proved to be a difficult task. He says he earned degrees in physics and electronics, but the schools we contacted say they've never heard of him. He also said he worked as a physicist at Los Alamos National Lab, where he experimented with one of the world's largest particle beam accelerators, a half-mile-long behemoth capable of generating 700 million volts. Los Alamos officials told us they had no records of a Robert Lazar ever working there. They were either mistaken or were lying. A 1982 phone book from the lab lists Lazar right there among the other scientists and technicians. A 1982 clipping from the Los Alamos newspaper profiled Lazar and his interest in jet cars. It too mentioned his employment at the lab as a physicist. We called Los Alamos again. An exasperated official told us he still had no records on Lazar. EG&G, which is where Lazar says he was interviewed for the job at S4, also has no records. It's as if someone has made him disappear.
Well, they're trying to make me a non-person.
Explain. You called where?
Well, the schools that I went to, the hospital that I was born at, past job, and essentially nothing comes up with my name in it.
He smiles, but out of futility, knowing the whole thing must sound ridiculous. According to Lazar, his employer was the United States Navy. He says he and other government employees would gather near EG&G, fly to Groom Lake, then a very few people would get into a bus with blacked out or no windows and drive to S4.
So you get off the bus, what do you see?
Very interesting building. It's got a slope of probably about 30 degrees, which are hangar doors. And it has textured paint on it, but it looks like sand. It's made to look like the side of the mountain that it's in, whether it's to disguise it from satellite photographs or what.
He says he was never told exactly what he'd be working on, but figured it had something to do with advanced propulsion. On his first day, he was told to read a series of briefings and immediately realized how advanced the propulsion was.
The power source is an antimatter reactor. They run gravity amplifiers. There's actually two parts to the drive mechanism. It's a bizarre technology. There's no physical hookup between any of the systems in there. They use gravity as a wave, using waveguides, almost like microwaves.
It took a while, Lazar says, before he actually saw one of the flying discs. However, there were hints everywhere.
Right, they had a poster, and it looked like a commercial poster almost, like it was lithographed and you could buy it at a Kmart or something. But they were all over the place, and it had the disc that I coined the term the sport model, was lifted off the ground about 3 feet at area S4 on the dry lake there, and the caption on the bottom said "they are here," and those are just all over the place.
Later, he got to see the real thing.
When I was let in, it was the first time I saw the sport model in the hangar sitting down, and I was told they could have walked me in the front door, but they purposely wanted to walk me by it. I was told not to say anything and just keep my eyes forward and walk past the disc into the office area. And I did, and as we went by it, I just kind of stuck my hands on it just to run it alongside the thing, and that was about the smallest time. After that, I got to see it actually lift off the ground and operate.
But you also, in between that, you saw more than one.
Yeah. The hangars are all connected together, and there are large bay doors between each one. And there were 9 total that I saw, each one being different. Like they had the assortment pack.
Security at S4 was oppressive, Lazar says, and his superiors used fear and intimidation almost as a brainwashing tool.
It did everything but physically hurt me.
Put a gun to your head?
Yeah.
And said what? Actually put a gun to your head?
Well, they did that even in the original security briefing. They had guards there with M16. The guys slamming their finger into my chest, screaming in my ear. Some people pointing weapons at me. Like I said, it's not a good place to work.
I'll give my McGuire theory at the end of all this, but let's go through the prongs here. So he stated, for the people that don't know, he stated that he actually worked in some kind of capacity on recovered saucers, possibly extraterrestrial in nature as far as he knew. And people said he never worked at Los Alamos or any of these places, and that he never was even employed by any government agency. So what's interesting is years later, there's actually a video surfaced in court where he actually produced a pay stub from Naval Intelligence, which was actually kind of curious. I was going to ask you, like, why would it have been Naval Intelligence? Do you know?
Well, because, like, the Navy is where, like, all of the real intelligence comes from.
So
everyone knows that.
So Navy Intelligence is working on flying saucers in the middle of the desert. Is that like an inside joke or something?
No, it's the same reason why the Scott Anderson base in Antarctica is owned by the Navy. It's the same reason why all of the technology and computer systems are run by the Navy. The Navy with its boats, like, it's like, did they just, like, you know, oh, we're the Navy. Like, if you join the Navy, like, I mean, you don't really even have to, like, swim. I mean, that's the Coast Guard. Like, the Navy's got, like, this, like, whole other operation brewing. Of course, like, I'm not necessarily saying that I was Navy, but...
So this W-2 form produced in Nevada court in 1990...
Seems to me that Mr. Lazar's problem is of an emotional disturbance nature, really much more than the criminal nature. I mean, you're reading everything here, and I agree with, in spite of what you say, Mr. Lukens, I think that that it is a substantial penalty that he has, in fact, been convicted of a felony. I have letters from Dan Stegman, who was surveillance manager at the Sahara and Hacienda Resorts. I have statements from George Knapp. I have reviewed the material from Mark Fierro, from Mr. Bilbray's office. I'm impressed with all of that. I note that although it doesn't show a lot of income, we do have a W-2 form of record that shows that he worked for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence.
Very important point.
Evidently, based on what you say, that affirms that Detective Bill Young, who investigated this, does not have any objection to probation. I was impressed with the letter from the defendant, in which he acknowledges that his actions were irresponsible, and they caused great embarrassment and pain to me and my loved ones. I think that all of that is appropriate to put on the record. I have a letter from Don Williams, a friend of his who is a businessman in our community. I was impressed with the fact that no police investigation was involved in this case, I guess, until he confessed on television. And I also note that he is in fact listed in the Los Alamos National Laboratory Telephone Directory. It's obvious it's very difficult to get information on Mr. Lazar from government sources, enormously difficult. With all of that in mind, it seems to me here's what's appropriate under the circumstances. In addition to the $20 administrative assessment, this court does now sentence you, Robert Lazar, confinement in the Nevada Department of Prisons for a period of 3 years. I'll that sentence and place you on an indeterminate period of probation not to exceed 3 years, subject to the following terms and conditions. Number one, I think you can do some useful community service, and I will order that you do 150 hours of community service during the period of probation. Number two, you have no contact with prostitutes or brothels, be they legal or illegal during your term of probation. Number three, I'm going to order that you have psychotherapy once a week with a qualified psychiatrist, psychologist, or marriage and family counselor for a period of 1 year. And thereafter, if the professional does not feel you're ready to be released. And it is my understanding that you are willing to give up your passport. It seems to me that's probably appropriate. Should you have a business need to travel, I would imagine that that could be worked out with your probation officer. That will be the sentence. Thank you.
Pretty harsh for trumped up charges.
It said Department of Naval Intelligence. Is that a real thing? I mean, why is there so, like, how many people have even heard it? Like, what is up with that? And apparently it was accepted in court. So what does that mean? So it was official?
Well, naval intelligence is a real thing. Like, that I can verify that it is, in fact, a real thing. You know, and if you really talk to any, like, you know, real Navy people, and again, I'm not saying that I was Navy,
Well,
but if you talk to any...
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it called the Office of Naval Intelligence? I mean, what was it previously called, the Department of Naval Intelligence? Because I actually, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so this is where it becomes gray area. Inside of offices, sometimes there are like departments. So there's actually more than one intelligence like brick. It's not just like one organization. It's kind of like, you know, if you worked for the CIA. A lot of people are like, oh, I work for the CIA. No, you work for, you know, the Central Intelligence Agency, but it's the department of inside. Like, there's multiple departments.
Okay,
like,
so yeah, this stuff is on the internet now, post 2012-ish. Was it public? Was the Department of Naval Intelligence public information in 1990 at the time Lazar produced his W-2 in court?
I actually don't know the answer to that. That's an interesting question.
I'm not sure it was, because, I mean, again, if any of the MINDSHOCK listeners know, because people were saying it was fake and that doesn't exist. But I actually did look it up,
but like the same thing is said about SEAL Team 6, and like that existed back then. So like for real.
Well,
so
no,
I mean,
it's just curious how like coincidence theorists, they're so hilarious because they just pretend Lazar never actually worked for the military, and then his name actually eventually somebody dug up his name in the Los Alamos Laboratory Directory. So proof positive that not only did he work there, also the people who denied that he worked there, they were obviously in on it, because decades later, I don't know the exact year, like within the past 10 years, 2 or 3 people who are now retired confirmed that he did in fact work there after they retired.
Bruce, let me just like put like something to bed for the MINDSHOCK listeners. I'll give you I'll throw you a bone. Okay? Have you ever seen the movie The Game with Michael Douglas?
I probably did when it first came out, but I don't really have a good recollection of it.
Okay, there's a company that, like, you know, his brother Sean Penn hires called CRS. Okay, that like produces this game that Michael Douglas has to go through. And he doesn't really realize that, like, it's all a game. Like, at a certain point, these people are real. Like, there's guns and everything else, okay? There's a very good line in that movie where the guy says, CRS doesn't go out of business. They just move from floor to floor, okay? So when something happens with the government where they end up in their own court, okay, the name just changes and they move to another floor. That's what happens. I don't know if you've ever been to the Pentagon, okay? The Pentagon, by the way, doesn't actually have an address. I don't know if you know that or not. It's just the Pentagon, okay? All right? If you go to the Pentagon, you would be shocked, okay? And you want to know why? Everyone thinks it's like this, like, you know, huge, like all this, like, you know, big offices. When you walk down a hallway, all it is a bunch of blank doors. Okay? And you go to the door that you're supposed to go to. Okay? When the terrorists actually hit the Pentagon, there was a huge problem that the media whitewashed because no one knew where anyone else's office was. So documents and shit were burning in a building that they had to keep open because, of course, that was the building that was, like, trying to defeat the terrorists. And they were kicking in doors trying to save filing cabinets of handwritten files, but they didn't even know what departments they were going into. So that's the way that the government works. The government information is in a one straight shot. You share information with the government. The government doesn't share information with you. So when someone questions them, they're just like, oh yeah, like actually there's this W on the end of this.
Is this a good time to ask you if it was coincidental that on 9/11 the destruction of the Pentagon just happened to be in the area of the office where the files were for the missing trillions that Rumsfeld announced on September 10th? Or is that, are you not allowed to talk about that?
I'm not at liberty to say anything about that. And I'm not at liberty to talk about that, like, you know, archival fire in the 1970s that just magically burned all of those records.
Wait. What are you talking about?
Oh, the National Archive fire.
We need to do a separate podcast on that. I think you actually did mention it before, and I think there's a reason you're mentioning it, but you don't want to be too explicit. But hold on, let's circle back to Lazar right now. So Lazar so initially when he
okay, so wait, let me just clarify that, and then we can move on. There is a certain reason why I bring that up, and it's kind of similar to the reason why when Coca-Cola was first founded, they burned all the original documents of Coca-Cola. So, but yeah, we don't need to get into that right now.
I like you had to clarify. We didn't need to get into that. But okay, so Lazar, what I find amusing is that the coincidence theorists, they thought he was a total sham that never worked for the government in any capacity and made everything up. And then you have all these records validating the fact that he did work at Los Alamos in some capacity, whatever capacity that may be. That coworkers that initially said he didn't work there because they were still under contract, once they retired and they were no longer under contract, all of a sudden they confirmed that he did in fact work there. And he produces this in 1990. There's this video, which it didn't even hit the internet until maybe a decade or more later. But he actually produced these documents in court that he's paid by the Department of Naval Intelligence, and people actually said that the department didn't exist. So it's all kind of curious how, to a certain extent, Lazar has kind of cleared his name to a point. Now,
well, yeah, and like you also have to understand, Bruce, that like the coincidence theorists are like, I mean, really, like they're just kind of like the government in like people clothing, like, you know, civilian clothing. Like, I mean, the truth is that if it was really that secret, it would have been some sort of public shell company. It wouldn't have been something called naval intelligence. You know,
yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, like, that's just people, like, trying to, like, they were either being paid off or they actually worked for, like, the media, like, the government branch of the media, because, like, the government owns the media, too. Like, that's all a bunch of shit. If you think that, like, you know, the media is free and public enterprise, like, I mean, you know, just, like, stick your fucking head in the oven.
I mean, that's kind of, in the post-internet age, I mean, that's kind of sad. Pre-internet, you could understand why some people said that, but I'm going to drop an OG Mark Twain quote. So Mark Twain, over a century ago, said this, or approximately a century ago. If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed.
Yep.
So that was pre-internet. So, I mean, you have a point. What's everybody's excuse post-internet age that they still believe the news after all those clips of them, you know, kneeling in water pretending there's a storm?
Well, because they're even stupider. They believe the internet, which was created by the government.
All right, we're not going down that rabbit hole, but I do want to touch upon element 115, and I know you have a very deep knowledge of this. So,
which, by the way, you know, like, we have to do a separate podcast on why the government is, the internet is actually a government program. I mean, that's funded by the National Science Foundation, but, like, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably like a 5-hour podcast, because there's definitely a lot there. So, element 115. So, for years, Lazar claimed element 115 was involved in this technology or whatever, and then, of course, all the coincidence theorists, the authority-worshipping cultists, they're like, wait a second, that's not in the encyclopedia, therefore it's fake. And lo and behold, in the year 2016, all of a sudden, element 115 is added to the periodic table, also known as moscovium, which is another rabbit hole, and I want you to explain this. So in Dubna, Russia, in 2003, this is the official story, element 115 was so-called discovered at the Flerov Laboratory for Nuclear Reactions by a group of scientists led by nuclear physicist Yuri Oganessian. So the element was eventually named Moscovium because Dubna is a city in Moscow. So Lazar, is this the same element Lazar is talking about? So was he working with some kind of tech that was not yet made public? And what is the entire story surrounding element 115? Because Lazar, again, I don't know if there's people that don't know this that are listening to this podcast, but Lazar claimed that he saw evidence of anti-gravity propulsion technologies and a minimum of 9 alien spacecraft stored in a hangar at Area 51. I know you don't want to talk about it, but he claimed that there was some kind of element known as element 115, or labeled as such, involved in all of this. So can you shed light on this?
No. I don't know anything.
Come on, JR, throw us a bone.
Well, okay. So, like, one of the things that, like, you have to know about, like, the military is, like, a tremendous amount of effort is, like, you know, invested into propulsion. I mean, when you think about it, it's the propulsion of rockets, it's the propulsion of bullets, it's the propulsion of vehicles, it's the propulsion of satellites, it's the propulsion of everything. The whole military runs on propulsion, okay? Everything from the guns to the vehicles to the warfare run on propulsion. So I'm quite confident that he was talking about that. It is not shocking at all that he was working on that. What's shocking is that he spoke about it and lived. So
well, we're going to get into that in a moment. Why are you refusing to specifically address element 115?
Well, Bruce, first and foremost, I'm not a subject matter expert. Second of all, I have a nice pension, and I don't want to end up in a desert. Third of all, I don't like deserts. Fourth of all, I've never been to a desert. Fifth of all...
Sure you haven't. You've never been to Groom Lake, JR? Come on. Seriously? You haven't worked at Groom Lake?
Bruce, here's the thing. Like, there's a lot of other Groom Lakes out there. So, you know, like, it's, no, I haven't.
Okay, so you're refusing to address element 115. That in and of itself has given us an interesting tidbit of information. Okay, so let's move on to this is the biggest problem I have with Lazar's story, believe it or not. I don't have a problem with him saying that he works on these aircraft, and I don't have a problem with him actually showing his friends and filming the UFOs flying over Area 51 in the desert. And there's actually a video of that, I'm sure you've seen it. And that's why he supposedly got in trouble after that and fired whatever and disavowed in whatever capacity. So I don't have a problem with any of that, and I'll explain why. I think he might be telling the truth about all of that, but not necessarily in the way people think. And that's why he's passing all the lie detector tests, because he's stating what he believes is true, even if it's technically not true. But before we get to that, here's my number one issue with Bob Lazar. He claimed that he was chased. Let me actually bring this up so I get all the details correctly, but he claimed that he was chased by a vehicle and fired upon on the highway while driving. Are you aware of this?
As a result of going public, have there been any attempts made on your life?
One day when I was getting on Interstate 15, driving down Charleston Boulevard, a car came up alongside of me, and I thought he was just trying to race me to get on the freeway. This was after I had left the project. It was a white, boxy-looking car. Exactly what make and model, I don't know. But I accelerated to get on the freeway to go fast, and there was a gunshot, and the back of the car was hit, and I skidded off into the median. And I stopped, and I was frightened. And I just stood there because I thought the guy was going to be alongside of me and just shoot me. I had nothing to do. I was essentially paralyzed with fear, and I waited there, and then nothing else happened. And do I know it was a government agent trying to kill me? No, it could have been a drive-by shooting. Maybe. So it was an attempt on my life, but by who specifically, I don't know. Though I was threatened before I had left. They threatened my wife's life and my life, so I can only put two and two together and say that they were kind of pissed at me.
In an earlier interview, you had mentioned that they had put a gun to your head. Tell us about that.
That was after we were caught out when I had the test flight schedule, and I brought some friends out to show them the disc test. We got caught out there. And the following day, I was debriefed down at Indian Springs Air Force Base. and I was in the room with the security guards that caught us, my supervisor and some other people, and some other security personnel. They were essentially grilling me about security. How could I possibly bring people out there? And I guess I wasn't as responsive as they would like, and they got in my face and wanted to pull the sidearm out. Just pushed it against them.
Have you maintained any contacts with your colleagues out at S4?
No, I never heard from anyone other than for a very brief time after I left. Dennis, who was my supervisor, did try and make contact with me at the meeting place was the Union Plaza Hotel, and I took a friend of mine, Gene Huff, down there, and another friend, a former colleague and scientist from Los Alamos, and we saw him, but I also did recognize some security personnel walking around there from S4, so whether or not it was a setup or what was going on or was trying to talk to me, we never found out, and we left. It just was a real strange situation. I never heard from him since.
No, but that's not really surprising. Like,
well, that's
when you
piss
piss them off, like, you don't really want to piss them off.
No, but
like,
here's the thing. It doesn't make any sense, because they could have easily killed him a million times, and if they were just trying to scare him, why did they only do that one time?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of different reasons. One of them is that, like, he was fired, but then he became a consultant for another agency. Like, one hand doesn't necessarily wash the other. I mean, let's put it this way. Look at the way, like, NASA spends billions of dollars and they don't do anything. Then look at, like, the FBI and they just have, like, millions of dollars in, like, briefcases. Like, if there's, like, a child kidnapping. Like, certain organizations handle things differently. So, like, you know, it could be that, you know, he swapped agencies, or another agency, hired him because his contract was up, because after all, it is the government, and they're still, like, the bottom line. And, the other agency that he was leaving was pissed off. So, I mean, you know, there's a couple different things there. Yeah, the CIA doesn't necessarily admit anything to the FBI. They're not at liberty to. So, like, it's the same thing. Like, if he went to go work for, like, another department, like, you know, that department might have been pissed off.
Has this really been scrubbed from the internet, like John Lear's Dream Factories on Mars? I'm having trouble pulling up the account of him. I remember this very well. I don't believe this is a Mandela effect. There was one claim that he made that was just really bonkers. I believe he said they also broke into his house one time and possibly stole some things. And then he was also followed on the highway, and someone followed him, and they were apparently shooting at him from a vehicle. To me, that was one of the biggest issues with his claims. Now, also,
well, okay, so the other factor that you have to consider is it could be also that he was being shot at because he either rejected the advances of or pissed off another nation, such as the Russians.
Well, do you find it? That's the thing. Like, what is this connection of Element 115 to Moscow?
What's the connection of the United States to that part of the East in general over, like, the past 100 years?
And, like, a lot of people think that Lazar is just, like, some dumb schmo. Like, he was actually kind of a super genius. In the 70s, he actually had a jet. He put a jet engine on his bicycle. There's even a photo of this. And he actually achieved 65 miles per hour with a jet engine strapped on top of a bicycle. He also allegedly had a car that ran on hydrogen, but who knows? I mean, there was a video of that.
So you read all over the internet about people and they run their car on water and hydrogen fuel cells and so on. You're running your car on
Hydrogen. You can't run a car on water.
But you're using water.
Right. You use water as the source material. You run electricity through it, and it breaks it down into hydrogen and oxygen, and then you can burn the hydrogen.
All right, so you found a way to store a lot more hydrogen in hydride. The equivalent of a full tank of gas. You want to fill up your car, how much hydride do you need?
Well, I'll show you.
No way.
Yeah, that's the volume it takes to store enough hydrogen to propel this car close to 400 miles. Just about what it gets running on a full tank of gas.
Wow.
And it's a lot safer than gasoline.
Really?
Yeah, these tanks can be shot at with incendiary bullets, or cut in half with a chainsaw, and throw a match on them, they just smolder like a cigarette. And you can't say that about a gas tank. Now, if you store hydrogen or just compressed gas in a tank, it can certainly explode, catch on fire. Here, only the hydrogen that you need is released from the tank. When the tank's heated, it produces hydrogen and the car burns it. So there's never much gaseous hydrogen in the system at any given time.
So these are the fuel lines? No, what are these?
These are this provides power to the heater in the tank and also reads back the temperature of the tank.
Why is that important?
Well, when you apply heat to hydride, it releases hydrogen. So as power is applied to here, it heats the hydride, and then the gas comes out the big hoses under them.
They have 4 hoses. Do they all mix into one big hose or something?
Because you can only get hydrogen out of hydride at a certain rate with a certain temperature. And a single tank, you can't get it out at the volume you need. So you really just split it into 4 smaller units, heat them separately, and it works just fine.
Look at that. Wow.
So there's power of hydrogen. You see, just from water, something exploded.
So this is the same thing that was inside the lab?
Yeah, that was a small tabletop model. This is a large industrial version, essentially, which connects right to the water main.
Right.
And produces a much higher volume.
The water main, the water garden hose.
Right, yeah, garden hose. You can plumb it in like you connect your dishwasher, or just connect it to a garden hose.
Right.
And it's powered by either solar array, solar panels, which convert sun into electricity, or a wind turbine, takes the wind, converts it to electricity, or any other way. But the idea is just to use complete green energy. Ideally, I like to run this one on solar. New Mexico gets a lot of sunlight, so that's really all there is to it. You connect it to a water line, plug it into your solar panel, and open the water line. It starts producing hydrogen. And when it has a sufficient quantity in there, let the hydrogen out, and you just leave it plugged into your car overnight.
Now, this is the same as those other 2 tubes, right?
Right.
Hydrogen and oxygen.
Correct.
Whichever one is.
The oxygen we have no use for, so we just vent off into the air. And the hydrogen.
It's very nice of you. I'm sure the Earth would be proud.
Well, it could use all the oxygen it can get. So the hydrogen, using the water pressure, is compressed into the hydride tanks.
The water pressure, like a syringe, it pushes it right into the tank.
Exactly. Well, there's the standard gasoline fill, but also there's a hydrogen in it, which you just click on, leave it on overnight, and as the generator makes hydrogen, it compresses it in there at a nice slow rate, and the tanks become full over a period of about 8 hours or so. There are little points here and there that do have to be addressed. I mean, when it comes right down to it, you don't want fuel tanks inside the vehicle. This is a prototype, so ideally, eventually, you'd want the tanks outside, just like a fuel tank is.
Why can't everybody do this? I mean, gas is going to $5 a gallon.
Right.
It's terrible. The whole country's falling apart. We're, killing people all over the world for oil. And this, you're driving a car on this, and you can do it. And you can convert any other car.
Yeah, unless I'm sure there are cars that have some technical problems, but yeah, essentially, any car can be converted. The whole problem to it is the material in the hydride. The hydride itself, one of the main components of it, is classified as a weapon material. and it can only be used in thermonuclear weapons. And because, even though it's not a dangerous material, explosive, or anything by itself, just because it's used within those nuclear weapons that are obviously secret and the components thereof, but because it's used in those, it can't be used for any other civilian purposes. So you can't even purchase the material, which is why we had to make it.
You made it.
Yeah.
But isn't that, don't you need big particle accelerators and things?
So that was the one loophole. You can make the material, you can't buy it. So
where's the you have a particle accelerator?
Yeah, so all you have to do is build a particle accelerator and you can make all the hydride you need.
The biggest thing that stands in the way right now is just getting that material inside the tank, that hydride material.
Right.
And the reason you can't is because
it's a weapon material.
But there's nothing dangerous about it.
No, it's
it
just
won't
used
blow
as
up.
a weapon. Right.
Well, beryllium's used as a weapon too.
Right.
Basically, this whole thing boils down to how you store the hydrogen. So we found a metal. We have a material that we can store the hydrogen in.
We have a material we can safely store hydrogen in, and a sufficient quantity to replace the gas tank on a car. So we can provide enough hydrogen to drive a car as you normally would.
And then that kind of was just never spoken about ever again. And for some reason, nobody ever brings it up. And for some reason, in any of Lazar's recent interviews, nobody's holding his feet to the fire about the claim about him being followed and shot upon. Do you think he made that up, or do you think that was real?
Bruce, let me just say this, okay? Like, they might think that he's just like this schmuck, quack, moron, okay? But, like, those people think that, like, SpongeBob SquarePants is entertaining.
Well, I mean, the Hawk was pretty entertaining in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie.
The fact that you know that
we went
is
over
disturbing.
We went over this on the David Hasselhoff podcast. How
and my mind correctly blocked it out. And now it's going to have to go through another iteration of blocking it out.
Well, by the way, the MINDSHOCK fans are actually clamoring for episode 2 in the David Hasselhoff series, and they're hoping it's like a 100-episode series.
Bruce, let's just stick to, like, UFOs. I just listening to that guy's resume over a 2.5-hour period was, like, enough for me for a while.
Let me ask you this. Do you think behind the scenes, David Hasselhoff, Bob Lazar, and Richard Simmons are, like, best buddies? Do you think they jazzercise together, Jan?
Well, I mean, if they don't, they definitely tie bow. But,
I mean, they were around, back in at least in the 80s. Do you think they were buddies that jazzercise?
Well, I'm pretty confident that, like, I mean, Hasselhoff is, like, famous and just, like, randomly stumbles into enough crap that, like, I'm sure at some point he brushed, like, against Richard Simmons, like, even, like, at a cocktail party. Like, because Richard Simmons is also in his own right, like, he's pretty famous. So, and he was also involved in theater, I believe, as well. So,
So, a lot of people don't know this, but we're about to go down a rabbit hole in typical MINDSHOCK fashion. So, Bob Lazar, I believe his first wife. Bob Lazar married his first wife, Carol, July 27th, 1980. So, on the marriage certificate, her name comes up as Carol Nadine Strong. Now, Strong apparently was associated by none other than the Hells Angels.
Bruce, why are we even talking about Bob Lazar? I was supposed to be complaining about the millennials.
Here's an article from Thursday, March 13th, 1975. Hells Angels slaying sentence. A Superior Court judge has sentenced 32-year-old Carol Nadine Eslin to state prison for her role in the murder of a San Jose man who was apparently stabbed and gunned down by a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang and his wife. Does this surprise you, JR?
A little bit, but, like, The Hells Angels have actually been involved, and you need to do a separate podcast on that, and a lot of shifty government crap.
No, but why is Bob Lazar's wife involved in Hells Angels murders?
I don't know. Was Bob Lazar like a motorcycle guy?
Do you think Bob Lazar's a nerd? Do you think he was a secret member of the Hells Angels before he joined the Los Alamos laboratory and worked on cutting edge things? I mean, you know what's funny though? He did put a jet on his bicycle when he was a kid.
Well, I do have to say one thing, and like this is kind of like, motorcycles are a military thing. Like that's not just like like the Hells Angels, like they didn't, Hells Angels, the One Percenters, all that, like, they might have their motorcycle gangs, but like the real like motorcycle movement happened thanks to the military. Like that's really like where they come from. So it's not surprising.
Why do you think anybody's ever asked him about his Hells Angels, his wife's Hells Angels connections?
I don't know, but like, I mean, like, what do you mean, like, his wife's connections? I mean, he could be a Hells Angel.
Do you think Bob Lazar was a Hells Angel?
What do you mean, what?
You think Bob Lazar runs around with the Hells Angels on weekends?
He's probably a fucking charter member, Bruce.
You think Richard Simmons is? The Hoff definitely likes his motorcycles. I mean, he uses them in music videos as well.
Yeah, but like he uses like those European ones.
Does he? Are you familiar with every brand of motorcycle David Hasselhoff has used in every single one of his music videos? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you're a pretty big Hoff fan, but I don't know.
I see him as like more of a Vespa kind of guy.
All right. So I'm still having trouble like nailing down, like I really want to find this exact claim by Lazar regarding him being followed on the highway and shot upon, because I have an issue with that. You think that really happened? Or do you think that was one of his Hells Angels escapades and he conflated it?
Just ask a pizza delivery guy in Detroit.
Hold on a second. If Bob Lazar was MK Ultra, do you think some of the memories got crisscrossed between his Hells Angels life and his scientist nerd life? And that's why he had trouble recollecting certain things and he mixed some things up?
No, what is him being a Hells Angel or like liking motorcycles? Well, I mean, obviously, like how do you know that that's a secret?
I don't. I'm just saying, if he was MK Ultra and the government messed with his mind, what would that?
I mean, when you think about it, Bruce. I mean, I don't know if you want to think about this, okay? But like, when I go to work, I wear a suit and tie, okay? Like, when I get home from work, the suit is gone before I even get into and the pants are gone and the tie is gone, within 5 feet of the door frame, because I don't want to wear that anymore. Just because he looks like a nerd while he's giving interviews doesn't mean that he's not really into steampunk or being Hell's Angel.
So you think Bob Lazar is this super dangerous Hell's Angel killer?
Well, that he knew. I mean, yeah.
Wow, that's quite mind-shocking, JR. That's quite mind-shocking. So Groom Lake, supposedly Area 51, are you allowed to talk about Papoose Lake, Area S4? That's what
No, I'm not allowed to talk about anything that has to do with Nevada, because Nevada is a figment of everyone's imagination.
He actually put a jet engine on his car as well. I mean, I'm looking through some old photos here. These are quite fascinating. What is Lazar's obsession with putting jet engines on everything? Bicycles, cars. I mean, this guy's a jet engine fanatic. Is that why he was recruited by the government?
I don't know why he would be recruited by the government. The government recruits in a very strange manner.
All right, so what do you think of... Okay, so You think it might be legitimate that he was chased and fired upon?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's standard procedure.
All right. So...
Wait a minute. I'm not... Okay, so let me just rephrase that. It's not necessarily standard procedure, but, like, based on what you're talking about and the agencies involved, it's standard procedure.
Oh, by the way, so on his... You don't want to talk about Majestic, but the numbers on his W-2 form, some people apparently tracked it down, and the employer ID number comes back as top secret in IRS records. And there's another number, E6722MAJ, that people are theorizing is Majestic. Can you make any comment on that whatsoever, or no?
You know I'm not going to answer that.
Okay, fair enough. Apparently, Bob Lazar also actually produced... Whoa, this is weird. I totally forgot about this. I don't know if this is real or fake, but supposedly Lazar actually produced his ID, which actually says U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence, with that same number, E-6722MAJ. It also says MAJ down the side of the ID, and it also says S4, DS, ETL, and WX on the bottom. Any comment on that or no, JR?
No. Except to say, like, you know, no.
Okay, then. Okay. So, and then, of course, we already went over him passing all the lie detector tests. So let's get into what I believe is going on here, and you can comment on this. So, and I think we might have actually touched upon this very briefly in a previous episode, but let's actually get into this now. So I don't know if the government would be that careless. Is it possible he was specifically shown these things and the government wanted to kind of measure whether or not he would go public with it and the reaction of the public to it, all possibly under the umbrella of Project Bluebeam?
No, the only way that, like, they would do what you're asking, or, you know, like, is if he really didn't see those things, he was watching a videotape of it, and they were injecting him with chemicals to see, like, what was going on. Like, that's their thing. Most likely he was a drone that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but because he was able to see that, they realized that he was able to see that, okay, and he saw more than 4 seconds of it, which is all you're really supposed to see when you work for them. And if you see more than that, then, like, you're either, like, one of the upper-level people that you've sold your soul to them, or, like, they cut you loose and just call you a complete nut job after injecting you with more chemicals. So, like, you act, like, even more off the wall.
See, some people are going to call you a shill for that.
They might, but, like, I mean, ultimately, like, the thing is when it comes down to it, the government doesn't just, like, do that. Like, I mean, when you look at, even when you look at, like, MK Ultra and stuff, they did that to a wide range of people. Like, Jonestown and all that stuff, like, there was, like, a lot of people involved in, like, the wash. Like, they don't just do it to one person.
All right, actually, we forgot to talk about one thing which I wanted to talk about first before we get to Operation and Project Bluebeam, whatever. For those that don't know, Bluebeam, this was... I actually do not believe Bill Cooper was the first person to bring this forward, but he was the first person I remember talking about it, where Bluebeam is this government operation to usher in a new world order, uniting all of the countries, faked alien invasions. So the goal is to use hologram technology or maybe not even holograms, actual physical UFOs, whatever the case may be, in order to fake alien invasions. That's what Project Bluebeam is. So if this is all under the umbrella of Bluebeam, that's the way I'm leaning based on all this information. I've done deep dives into Lazar before. I actually find him truthful in the sense that even if he's saying things that are not true, he believes they're true. And whether that's
okay. I mean, like I said, he like in all likelihood, and you can call me a government shill, but in all likelihood, he was a drone that saw like things that he was supposed to see, and then went public when he wasn't supposed to, or saw things that he wasn't supposed to see, which is why they cut him loose. And there's obviously going to be a certain amount of like embellishment.
I'm leading to entrapment. I think they baited him. And I think they suspected he would go public. They wanted to see the media response, and they wanted to see the public's response to what would happen on a leak like this, all part of a greater operation in this kind of 4D chess game. That's the McGuire theory. We're going to get a little deeper to it in a moment, but first, let's go back to Lazar's education and employment issues. Bob Lazar claims to have a master's degree in physics from MIT and a degree in electronics from Caltech. However,
and neither one of those are shills for the government, or the National Science Foundation.
We're talking about Lazar specifically here. So there are no such records. So what's curious is that nobody has come. Actually, I think there was one classmate who came forward, but people said they were dubious. I actually don't remember. I don't know if that classmate ever verified anything. So I don't know if we have 100% verified identities confirming his attendance of those institutions. And so what do you believe about that? Because initially there was no evidence of him working at Los Alamos either, and then that actually, however many years later for that to come forward. So if there is, so this is the thing, coincidence theorists. This is what's so goofy about coincidence theorists. I mean, they're Dunning-Kruger's obviously off the charts. If there is a conspiracy, how easy would it be for him to be erased? At least his record. I mean, that's really hard to do.
Well, all right. So wait, let me just debunk, the coincidence theorists here for a second, okay? Because it's true that under the certain government programs or whatnot, his identity would be augmented, okay, to where those things really those records wouldn't exist. Public records would not exist of you in that capacity. That's actually not that secret. Okay, I mean, look at your common election officials, okay, that are, their public records are not accessible. Or if you were to look at, say, Daniel's Law, okay, where, judges and police, if they were to, say, go somewhere to vote, or they were going to go and renew their driver's license, their address is not necessarily publicly accessible. But I'll give you something even better that's going to completely debunk, the coincidence theorists here. If you graduate from a college and do not pay them the full freight of what you owe them, they are not obliged to acknowledge that you graduated from them. And that is something that can happen to any civilian in the United States.
That's a good point, but I think the detractors of Lazar are stating there's not so much as registration or attendance records. We're not talking about the actual degree either. Just there's no record of him having attended the institution whatsoever.
Yeah, but even still, because he's so controversial, that isn't necessarily, the college doesn't have to admit that, they know him.
Well, or even you would think that classmates would have come out and said they knew him, right? Because his classmates from, his early childhood or whatever, at one point in his childhood have come forward and said they knew him at that school. But anyway, the point is we have two different categories here. No, and this is the thing. Bob Lazar is obviously a very smart man. Why would he claim, how easy would it be for someone to check that he doesn't have those degrees? I mean, is he really that dumb to make that up? Because that's the part I have trouble with. Why is he going to make up that he has degrees from two of the most well-known universities in the United States, which even before the internet, that could be fact-checked by any journalist by simply going into the admissions records office or any kind of records at the university or simply calling the university. Any of this can easily be verified. He's going public as one of the biggest whistleblowers in the history of the world, basically blowing the whistle on supposed extraterrestrial technology changing the face of history and the world as we know it. And he thinks nobody would have double-checked his degrees. That doesn't make any sense. So that's an issue for me. Now, again, if he was MK Ultra'd and they messed with his mind to the point where he really did not attend those institutions, but he thought he did, which is why he keeps passing all the lie detector tests. And by the way, I believe it wasn't just a random lie detector test. So the lie detector test, it's not admissible in court, but even the older polygraph, depending on the sensitivity that it was set to and the person doing administration, I believe he had, I forgot the guy's name, the #1 polygraph expert. So again, that doesn't mean anything really, but it's not just like it was an average polygraph. He passed the most rigorous polygraph tests possible. Obviously,
yeah, but
a brain fingerprint.
Okay, so let's look at the history of the polygraph. Just real. I mean, like, I don't want to look at the history. You don't need to pull it up. Okay, but if you did research, okay, the polygraph was actually invented by the clandestine service, okay, which works very heavily with naval intelligence and other intelligence agencies, i.e. the CIA, and so on and so forth. So if he was actually trained by those particular agencies that utilize the clandestine service version of the polygraph, you could have like the greatest civilian, whatever, former FBI, whoever, giving him the exam, and you could still pass it, because there are ways to fool a polygraph.
That's a good point. You opened up another theory that, is he a government agent working for the government, and this is a planned leak, and this was his role all along?
Well, that and you also have to understand as well that if he does work for the government and all this was verified, which, you know, like, I'm not at liberty to, like, you know, confirm or deny anything, but that said, okay, he could have easily gotten those degrees utilizing an alternate alias.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So he would
actually, nobody's brought that up. That's an excellent point. But yeah, that's an excellent point. But in the post-internet age, though, do you think, unless they were intimidated, why wouldn't people who knew him under a different name have come forward and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy. His name wasn't Bob Lazar, but yeah, that guy. We went to class with that guy."
Well, okay. So it's also the pack mindset. He obviously strayed from the pack. He's different. He says certain things that, you know, when you graduate from a college such as that, and you're completely, like, broke because they took all of your money and basically mortgaged your life forever, you may not necessarily be inclined to align yourself with someone who spouts that type of information, because you want to just remain, you know, vanilla to the world. So you're employable.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But I mean, if he was a loner, I guess maybe you could say not a ton of people knew him. But you would think that there's always a couple of crazies that are willing to say, "I knew that guy," no matter how controversial the figure.
Yeah, but if they knew him under another identity, you know, like, that doesn't necessarily, it's very easy to, I mean, for all you know, he wore a disguise when he went there. You know, it could have been in a long Chima spider kind of moment. You don't know.
All right, that's okay. All right, fair points, JR. Fair points. Okay, so let's round this out with the Blue Beam issue. So if Lazar was told by the government, these are extraterrestrial craft, et cetera, and then they mocked up like fake alien bodies or whatever, and he saw all that, and it was all fake, but he thought it was real. That's my theory on Bob Lazar.
One or two autopsy photographs I saw dealt with just a small photograph, a bust shot essentially, just head, shoulders, and chest of an alien with a chest was cut open in T fashion and one single organ was removed. The organ itself in the other picture was cut and vivisected essentially. Showing the different chambers in there. This was totally unrelated to anything I was doing, but from that photograph it looked like what you see in UFO lore as the typical gray. So how tall it was from what I could see, I couldn't tell because I only saw a portion of the photograph. But if everything else you see is correct, I would imagine it was 3.5 or 4 feet tall. But there again, all I had to see was a photograph, and I didn't have much to go on.
What was the incident in 1979 that brought the alien exchange program of information to a halt?
Again, this is a story that was relayed to me, and allegedly what happened in 79, there was some sort of information exchange going on where there were actual live aliens at the facility, and at one particular point there was an area where some security personnel went to enter, and apparently because not the sidearms, but the bullets in the sidearms, from what I understand, if they would have entered the area, the bullets would have detonated. And supposedly one of the creatures tried to stop the security personnel from entering the area, and a fight ensued. And the bottom line from the altercation was that the security personnel, I don't remember how many were involved, but were all killed, and they died of head wounds, and that's all that I heard of that story.
And they just simply monitored the response to it, and that was the plan all along.
It would make sense.
I mean,
It would make sense.
another theory is, of course, that he was a government agent the entire time, and it was always planned for him to go public, and this was all part of the plan.
Yeah, but I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, look at Jonestown. Like, they doped them up and called it a religion. I mean, like, with, like, others, they doped it up and called it, a college education or, a prison sentence. So, I mean, for them to dope it up and just be like, hey, like, there's aliens, and, like, he's on, like, acid or something, and they're just simply, like, monitoring what is going on, I mean, it actually, I mean, like, if it quacks like a duck.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, though. Like, how, after all the shady crap the government has pulled with MKUltra, would it really be that surprising that they doped him up, exposed him to what they told him was alien tech and alien bodies, and then let him loose?
Yeah, it makes sense.
All right, so there you have it. All the MindShock listeners out there, that's our take on the Bob Lazar situation. And that's why he could always come off as honest. So, okay, we're going to round this episode out with JR's Corner. Some MindShockers have some very important questions for you, JR.
Oh, boy.
Are you ready?
I'm stoked.
Okay. Dave asks, yes, a question for JR. Would he mess with a pregnant chick?
You don't ever mess with a pregnant lady. No. You don't ever fucking mess with a pregnant lady.
He also added, I think I know the answer, however, I want to make sure.
Dave, take it from me, you don't ever, never fuck with a pregnant lady. Never.
David.
You deal with multiple dimensions there.
David asks, what is your goal in exposing these conspiracies?
My goal isn't necessarily to uncover any particular conspiracy. I've worked for the government for a very long time, and even though, like, I guess it could be perceived because I'm on a channel that is viewed as controversial, that I'm trying to debunk, all of these, or try to get to the corner of all these different conspiracies. I'm also trying to discuss things that could just be completely, like, misinformation, or make a joke out of things that are just really that outrageous. Because a lot of people have the wrong idea, unless you've been in the government or the military for a very long time. People have some really funny ideas over what really happens and how it really happens. So, yeah, that's my answer there. Kind of a political answer, I suppose, but yeah.
Well, I think it was okay to clarify misconceptions about government operations.
Yeah, it's not just about conspiracy. It's also to clarify, like, I mean, the government, like, the military, I have a lot of friends that they work on a lot of these, top secret projects, and a top secret is not always Area 51. Top secret is actually pretty funny. It's when you ever have that kind of clearance. It's actually very interesting.
Sometimes it's Area 52.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's Wyoming.
Richie Rich has an excellent question. I mean, I hope you're sitting down for this. Does his government agency do mandatory jazzercise? Does he lead the workout?
Well, I don't necessarily lead. But, Richie, I can tell you that the government has a very stringent exercise and self-care regime that they implement, and that cascades through not just the military, but all of its departments. And physical fitness is encouraged.
Do you think, I mean, and as kind of a side note, do you think jazzercise should be mandatory in every single government school, preschool, every single government job, and possibly every job in every industry in America?
Well, I think I speak for Richard Simmons when I say that there's, it's good to sweat to the oldies, first of all. Second of all, I think that anything, whether it makes you laugh or whatever, if it gets you active, then, that's a good thing. Plus, you have to admit, Richard Simmons is actually legitimately entertaining to watch.
I mean, yes, yes, he is. Yeah, he's great.
Would you rather watch him or Suzanne Summers? Now, Suzanne Summers, like some could say, well, she's, got curves or whatever, but at the end of the day, I think Richard Simmons is more entertaining to watch, to be honest with you.
Well, if you want to really make it difficult, what about Richard Simmons versus David Hasselhoff? Isn't it surprising that Hasselhoff doesn't have a jazzercise video?
I can see that happening, and then, it starts raining glitter, and then, Pesci comes in and does, a rap number, just in the middle of everything,
Lay down my ass, treat all my bras like trash. You'll catch a blast if you move too fast. I heard their fathers had stocks in mine, so I fucked them up and left them floating in a pond. It's a Richard dedication. I made man back like my ass is fat. My mother didn't like me, I never gave a fuck. My brother didn't like me, I hit him with a truck. Got a motherfucker. I'm the real McCoy. That's it, motherfucker. I'm a wise man.
Yeah. I'm surprised, come to think of it, you just touched on something very interesting, Bruce. The fact that, Hasselhoff doesn't have his own exercise program is very surprising. No, but seriously, just in lieu of Baywatch, the fact that, he does pride himself on fitness.
Well, hold on, JR. Now that you mention it, in an episode of the TV show, Young Sheldon, David Hasselhoff actually has a cameo doing an exercise program known as Cowboy Aerobics.
Just stop talking about that, Bruce.
Where in the episode, Sheldon's older brother, Georgie, and also, you know what's funny? So the older brother is called Georgie, but also Jason Alexander from Seinfeld plays Mr. Lundy.
Just stop talking.
Hold on. In this episode, Sheldon's older brother, Georgie, decides to film and sell his own workout tape, then enlisted Lundy's services to improve the production and add much-needed pizzazz. After they settled on a cowboy aerobics theme, Georgie and Lundy secured an investor, Georgie's Meemaw, but the project fell apart over a hypothetical profit split. Lundy, still determined to make cowboy aerobics happen, hopped a flight to Burbank, California, where he met with the Hoff and convinced him to front a line of workout videos. What followed was straight out of a fever dream, and TV Line has the footage to prove it along with the photos. So the Hoff may not have done a fitness video outside of a TV show, but inside the fictional world, the Hoff has fronted cowboy aerobics.
Cowboy aerobics still doesn't have anything on jazzercise, Bruce.
Well, they should do a crossover with Richard Simmons for added star power, don't you think? And maybe throw in a Bob Lazar cameo for good measure.
if that television show had any class, they would have hired fucking Richard Simmons from the outset.
They should have thrown. Don't you think they should have thrown Bob Lazar in there for a cameo as well?
For all you know, it was produced by Bob Lazar. or his pseudo-identity.
Well, how do you think Jason Alexander fits into all of it?
Well, because, like, you know, the man needs to eat. So, I mean, like...
He looks like he does do a lot of that.
At a certain point, like, I mean, you know, like, give the guy a role. It's been, what, like, a decade? I mean, the last time, like, he saw, like, real work was Pretty Woman.
Is that your favorite movie?
No. I will say that it was Robert's opus. He never surpassed that. Bruce, are there any more questions?
Yeah, there's one more question for JR on JR's Corner. It's actually a poignant question. Allie P. the Goddess asks, what case has affected you the most off podcast?
I think that...
Is it Dahmer?
I can't really lay credence to any particular case. I can say that the ones where people have been shunned or drugged or imprisoned by not just necessarily the government, but I mean, like, in the case of Dahmer, where people are tortured for no other rhyme or reason other than somebody's desire to have absolute control over another individual, whether it's the programming through drugs and MK Ultra, or Dahmer, who wanted to, you know, drill holes in people's heads and pour acid in so he had zombies. Those, I think, are the cases that really affect me the most, because those people were just living their own lives. Think about just, you know, your own life, going to work, picking up the kids, going to, like, the grocery store, going out to dinner, and then all of a sudden that ends and you're just a slave in somebody's apartment, or you're a slave to, like, the government and you're given a number. Like, that's really fucked up when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, also, I know Jonestown. Like, you've been a long-time researcher of Jonestown. Like,
yeah, well, that just, like, really, that whole thing just creeps me out, yeah.
Yeah, that case seems to have weighed on you quite a bit, and just talking to you about it, you know, off podcast as well.
Yeah, it has. And, like, you know, I mean, there's a lot of cults out there. I mean, and there's a lot of cults that become religions, okay? But the fact that, like, they couldn't leave and they were in the jungle, and having been in South African jungles and knowing, like, how remote that really was and how, like, horrible it really must have been to have been contained in an environment like that. Because you've also got to remember, it wasn't just Jones that was torturing them. They were torturing each other. It was almost like Lord of the Flies at a certain point. You know, who was going to get more food, who had weapons and who didn't, who was, you know, in charge of a particular group of people. Like, it was really fucked up. Not to mention, like, the fact that, like, it really was the government that was just, like, giving them. I mean, whether or not you believe that it was MK Ultra, or you believe, which, I mean, there's strong evidence that, like, it was a brainwashing experiment. But even if you don't believe any of those things, the fact is that the government gave them carte blanche in the importation of weaponry, of, like, you know, toxic chemicals. Like, whether you believe that the government wanted them to use those things for that purpose, they got their hands on it somewhere. It didn't just magically, like, materialize there. They were allowed to bring those things there. And those people, whether they wanted to or not, succumbed to it. And I think it's really fucked up.
Yeah, definitely. And just as a tie-in, is there any case that we haven't discussed yet that you would like to do a podcast on? That's just a question for me, because, you know, we do have a lot of cases to cover, but I just wondered if there was a case that we haven't yet touched upon that you were interested in doing a podcast on.
You have to give me a minute to really think of it.
You mentioned Manson before, and that was requested, so we'll be doing one on that. But I was just wondering if you had, anyone that we haven't discussed at all before.
I mean, in terms of cults or just in terms of general?
Any case whatsoever. Any case of any kind.
I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I'd have to get back to you on that.
All right. So that was our inaugural JR's Corner segment. If anybody has any further questions for JR, we'll be doing JR's Corner on every episode that JR will be appearing on at the end of the episode. So send your questions in for JR if you have any. He, as you guys have noticed, he's pretty much able to answer any question that has nothing to do with top secret clearances. He will answer. And maybe he'll answer some top secret clearances ones as well. I mean, this podcast, actually, you've probably been the most revealing out of all of them, so that's kind of cool. I hope you're drunk enough for the next one to reveal even more. But there you have it.
If you want to send spirits to Bruce, he'll post a P.O. box below.
Do you think JR should have his own alcohol line?
Yeah, of course. That would be great.
Should you start your own brewing or whiskey? I mean, what kind of alcohol would you produce? I'm thinking vodka line, but I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. No, not vodka. No, not vodka.
Brandy?
Maybe bourbon. I can see bourbon.
All right. Well, there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the MindSHOCK podcast, where we delve into topics with logic and reason at the forefront, attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies like pretty much every other podcast and mainstream media source out there. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Any questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.
And JR is having out.